All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to get started on the beginning parts of the Civil War. Now, before we get into the actual war part, um, I feel it's important that you guys know about the beginning life of Abraham Lincoln because that plays a role into basically who he is and what kind of man he becomes, and then ultimately what kind of president he is and what we have during that time. And as you will find out, we needed the best of the best during that very crucial time. And Lincoln really was, in my opinion, the best president we've ever had and the right man for the right job at the right time. So let's go ahead and look at the objectives today. So we're going to analyze the path that Lincoln took to become president of the United States from when he was a kid to adulthood. Then we're going to examine the legend of Honest Abe. Everyone heard that nickname before, Honest Abe, Honest Abe. Well, was he really honest? We're going to look at that. And then we're going to create an argument on whether Lincoln would have gotten to where he was if it wasn't for his stepmother's support. All right, so this warm up is a little bit different than what you've been used to in class. For this warm up, what I want you to do is on that first line. All right, so for question number one for your warm up, you'll see there's three lines. The first line, I want you to think of three words that pop in your head when you see this picture of Lincoln. If that doesn't work, then tell me three words that you associate with Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so you should not be putting something like Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, iPhone, because that has nothing to do with Abraham Lincoln. All right. There's other words you can think of. Okay. So what you're going to do is think of three words. Okay. Write those words down. Okay. So I'll give you a couple seconds. Pause the video if you need to. All right. Sorry about that. I had the cough. Okay. So write those three words down. Okay. Because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so Lincoln was born February 12th, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky, which is now called LaRue County. His parents were Thomas Lincoln and Nancy Hanks. Now, that last name, the mom's last name, Hanks, might sound familiar. So if you know of an actor with the last name Hanks, first name Tom, they are related. They are actually blood related. Nancy Hanks is Tom Hanks's like I want to say it was great. I think there might be one more great aunt. So Lincoln and Tom Hanks are actually cousins, just an extended, cousins, but they are, in a sense, blood related cousins. All right. Now, another question I get in class was Lincoln an only child? No, he wasn't. He had an older sister and a younger brother. His brother died. His brother's name was Thomas Lincoln. He died when he was young, and the sister would die later on when he was, I believe, 19 years old, and she died giving birth to his niece nephew. I don't know which one it was, but the thing is, the baby died too. So yeah. Now his family were frontiersmen. Basically, what that was these people went out into the wilderness. They looked at a plot of land and said, "Okay, we're going to settle here." And they would basically clear the brush area, tall grass over that, clean that up, clean the dirt, make it level, take out all the rocks, chop down trees, make up their own home. Okay, so that's frontiersmen, basically taking nature as it is, cleaning it up to make it into farmland and a place where people could live. Now, here's the thing: these guys had to make their own home, the log cabins. That's why if you ever remember the little toy when you were kids called Lincoln Logs, it's named after Abraham Lincoln because he did grow up in a log cabin. Okay, but a lot of things, a lot of politicians back in his time were trying to claim, "Oh, I'm from a log cabin family." Now, why would they do that? Because the log cabin family was seen as like the poorest of the poor, humble beginnings. You start off with nothing. Because these log cabins aren't like the cabins we have nowadays, where it's nice and pretty, air conditioning, things like that. No, these log cabins, dirt floor, the wood wasn't always, perfectly cut and shaped. So sometimes little area between the wood, the wind would come through and they would have to like stick mud in there and stuff like that. And even then, like ants and other insects would burrow their way through and create holes. So they would have to keep plugging those things in. Okay. Now, here's the thing, why did those politicians do that when Lincoln was, growing up? Because they wanted to make it sound like I came from the bottom and I picked myself up. A lot of these politicians were not log cabin families. These guys were middle class, they came from nice homes. Some of them are really rich, but the idea of that, oh, I came from down here and I raised myself up, it sounded good. But Lincoln is one of the very few politicians who was a log cabin family member and basically brought himself from the gutter on the way up. Okay. Now here's the thing. If you did take a stake of claim and you said, this is the land I live on, this is the land I cleaned up and made my own, you had to go into a town and basically claim that land. You had to fill out the paperwork saying exactly where you're at, things like that, how many, how big, things like that. And sometimes what happened is these big plantation owners would basically pay off these clerks and government officials to lose the paperwork so that, hey, this claim, there's no paperwork for it. And that's what happens to Lincoln's family. Not just once, but I think, believe 2 or 3 times. The paperwork mysteriously disappears, and these plantation owners are like, well, you know what? I'll fill the paperwork. I'll pay for this land. So they got what they wanted. Because again, the Lincoln's family already did all the hard work, cleared out the whole area, made a house. So now, hey, this area is good to farm. So, yeah, that's why Lincoln's dad didn't really like slavery. It's not because of the treatment of the slaves, it's because these guys, these plantation owners, were really rich and got away with a lot of stuff. That's why the dad didn't like slavery. Okay. Now, at the age of 9 years old, Lincoln mom's she dies. Okay. His biological mother dies of milk sickness. Now, what is that? It's basically from drinking raw milk. Because you have to remember, these cows have like 3 stomachs. They weigh several thousand pounds, you know. And if someone's drinking straight up raw milk, weighing 100 and something pounds, you know, it's if this that animal is sick, it's going to hurt that person, and that's exactly what happened to Lincoln's mom, and it happened to a lot of other people. Basically, they can't keep anything in their body, and everything's coming out. So all like the liquid and some of that they have in their body, all the fluids, is coming out one way or the other, and they can't take anything in, or else they're just throwing it back up. So it's a horrible way to die, but that's what happened to Lincoln's mom. All right, so after Lincoln Mom's dies, his dad remarries this woman named Sarah Bush Johnston. Now, the thing is, Sarah Bush Johnson is pretty rich. I mean, she's not like filthy millionaire rich, but she is pretty rich for those times. And she decides to basically live with the Lincolns, in the cabin and stuff like that. This is the first time Lincoln is actually sleeping in a bed, because before he would basically sleep on the floor or on some hay, but he's never slept on a bed up until this point. Right now, his father was illiterate, and if you don't know what that word means, it basically means that he couldn't read. Okay, and typically when people can't read, it means they can't write either. Okay, the thing is, Lincoln's dad saw no value in education. He saw education as like a waste of time. He'd be like, "Oh, why learn about English? You speak it already." Why I learned about math? You give people money, they give you change back. You know, there's no need to know math or science or English. But his stepmom, on the other hand, basically was like, this boy wants to learn. She sees the desire and his eagerness to want to learn things. So she borrows books for him. And then eventually he does it on his own. He's asking neighbors and people in town, can I borrow a book that you have that you're not reading? Okay. Now, his dad was a very brutal man. I want to get this point across. His dad was like, as soon as the sun came up, a single ray of light came up from the sky, time to work, all the way up until the sun went down. His dad saw that life was about working. That's it. No fun whatsoever. You can have fun when you're dead. Your life is about work, work, work. If you don't work the whole time throughout the day while the sun's up, you basically wasted the day. It's no point. Might as well just stay in bed. His dad was a very brutal man. He hit Lincoln. Just drove him to keep, working harder and harder and harder, you know. And this, in a sense, helped Lincoln, but it hurt him too, you know. So Lincoln, as you see from this picture, that's how he was. From sun up to sundown, he was working in the fields with his dad, chopping trees, working the fields, things like that. And at nighttime, he's by the fireplace reading a book. And his dad would actually get angry at him, tell him, "Why are you reading that, this and that?" And his stepmom would be like, "Hey, he did his time with you. He went outside, he worked the whole time. This is his time now. Let him do what he wants. Let him read." So his stepmom really defended him. And he would later say that his stepmom was the angel he needed in his life. He gave her a lot of credit, and who knows where he would have been without her. So he gets to become a teenager, and he gets a first chance to leave the farm. He takes a job working on the flatboats. So basically, these are logs that are tied together, and on them they carry cotton, fruits, vegetables, lumber, whatever they could sell. And they would hit Lincoln and a friend would go on this little flatboat, go down the Mississippi River, stop at little towns along the way, try to sell their goods, right? Then once they got to New Orleans, whatever they had left, they sold it, and then they would basically walk all the way back to Illinois. Okay. Now, here's the thing. On one trip, Lincoln and his friend they parked their little flatboat by the side of a bay, and a runaway slave actually puts a knife to Lincoln and tells him, "Give me your boat." And Lincoln and the friend are just startled, and they basically tell the guy, "Hey, you're a runaway slave, right?" And that guy's like, "Yeah." They told him, "You're trying to reach north, aren't you?" He's like, "Yeah." They told him, "There's no point of taking this boat. The current on the river is going south. Meaning, if you take this boat from us, you're just going to go back to where you left. You need to go north. This boat's not going to help you. You can't go against the river." And so the slave was like, "Oh, dang, you're right, huh?" And leaves Lincoln and his friend alone. Imagine how history would have changed if this runaway slave had killed Lincoln when he was a teenager. Imagine how history would have completely been altered because of one person's decision not to harm or kill Lincoln. So Lincoln makes it to New Orleans on one trip. He makes his way back home, and his dad basically tells him, "Hey, we've already packed your stuff. We're moving out again." Lincoln goes, "Well, thank you for packing my stuff, but I'm not going with you guys." And Lincoln's dad is just furious. "What do you mean you're not coming with us?" And Lincoln's like, "Dad, there's more to my life than just farming because I want to do something besides farming." And his dad's like, well, you better not be asking us for money. You better not be doing this and that. You're going to crawl back to us. I know you are. And he's like, oh, that's what you think. Sorry, I'm going to make my own life. His stepmother gives him her blessing and just wishes him the best. Okay, total 180 from his own father. And Lincoln goes off on his own. All right, so Lincoln moves to this town called New Salem. It no longer exists, but there is a little commemorative fake town to basically show you where this town used to be. Now, Lincoln did a lot of jobs. He was a store clerk, he chopped wood, he was a local wrestling champion. All right. Now, if you've seen the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, you may have seen the parts where they show him like chopping down a tree with one swipe. That's not true. But they're not off by that much. If you look at this picture of Lincoln, you're probably looking like, God, he looks thin. Man, a mouse fart could knock this guy down. Thing is, guys, underneath that coat and some of that, Lincoln is ripped. I mean, he is pure muscle. All that years of hard work and stuff like that in the field with his dad, chopping trees and stuff like that, he is like muscle. So, an average sized tree would take him about 2 or 3 chops. Just boom, boom, and at most boom. All right, he was in wood chopping competitions and he won. He was a very strong man. And again, you wouldn't look at it from that picture and look like he looks like a dork, right? But in reality, he was fit. And when I put the local wrestling champion, he was a wrestling champion. It's not like the WWE stuff. You see him do the acrobatic jumps, and, like those lucha libres and stuff like that. No, 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 no. We're talking like real wrestling to the ground and pinning somebody and stuff like that. Lincoln is the only president to be in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Now, some student asked me, hey, is it true that he never lost a match? No, he did lose one match, and he went against another champion. And these guys went at it. Now, this other guy Lincoln wrestled, he was very feared. He was a big, strong man, and they wrestled. I mean, this match was like considered like the match of the century type of thing. And they're wrestling, wrestling, wrestling. And it looks like Lincoln's got the advantage and the other guy, then Lincoln again, and then the other guy. And at the very end, the guy just out wrestled Lincoln and pinned him. The guy is so impressed with Lincoln, he basically tells him, if you ever need anything, you let me know. You're my boy. And an incident would come on later on in life where Lincoln was basically like, these guys were like hassling him, doing this and that champion guy was right there, and he's like, "What's up, Abe? There's a problem here?" And everyone knew who that guy was, so they were just like, "Oh, dang!" And Lincoln's like, "No, no, I got it." He's like, "Well, hey, if you need me, you know where I'm at." You know. Now, this is also the time where Lincoln earns the nickname Honest Abe. Okay, now because thing is, like I told people in class, there's a difference between honest and being rude. So if someone was to ask you, do I look nice in this dress? And if you go, no, you look like a bunch of cottage cheese just mixed in together in that dress. You're not being honest, you're being rude. Okay? Being honest would be like, you know what, I don't think that dress really fits you. That's being honest. But Lincoln was able to be honest but tactful. So again, when he's being a store clerk, people would ask him, do I look good in this dress? This dress make me look good? Lincoln wouldn't say, "Girl, you're stretching that dress out, to its limits." Instead of saying stuff like that, he would say something like, "You know what? That color really doesn't go well with you. I'm sorry, but it really doesn't. Let's try this other dress." And he would get like a bigger size. See, now that really looks good on you. And don't you feel more like you have more room, like you can move more into this one? Yeah, you see that? Yeah. and the color really goes with you, and it's this time of the season for that type of dress. Yeah, that looks better. And people would come to him for advice, for telling them how their life was going, and they'd be honestly asking him, "What should I do?" And he would give the lawyer's address. He would help them, but not basically tell them this is what you should do. Basically let them make the decisions. But he would also be honest at the same time without being rude, and he did it with tact. So people, this is where he earned the nickname Honest Abe. So there was a thing called the Black Hawk War, where some Native Americans and the settlers were having some issues. Abe signs up, and a bunch of men, he's in with a bunch of group of men, and they were asked, who do you guys want as captain? And all these guys nominated Lincoln. They're like, this guy, he's honest, he's cool, he's straightforward. We like that. We want that as our leader, not someone who's going to BS us and tell us something just to make us feel good. Abe is the man. So once that's over, he runs for state legislature in 1832 and he loses. Then he runs for the Illinois House of Representatives and wins from 1834 to 1842. Now, during that time, he becomes a lawyer. He passes the bar exam, and he starts being a lawyer from 1836 up until he becomes president. Here's the interesting thing, though. He never attended law school, not one class. So, how did he pass this exam to be a lawyer? He read books. One of his best friend, Joshua Speed, was a lawyer, and he basically told him, "Yeah, here's this book, here's this book, here's this book. You should really look into this. Here's this type of cases that talks about this and appeals and things like that." So Lincoln read and read and read, and that's how he passed the bar exam without taking a single law class. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So then Lincoln becomes a member of the House of Representatives in 1846. Now, if you remember from the last class, this is when President Polk basically says Americans were killed on American soil by invading Mexicans. And Lincoln he's barely starting this job as a House of Representatives. It's his first year. And he stands up to the president saying, "Show me where on the map these Mexicans killed American soldiers." And he knows the president won't answer him because it's on disputed land. So already now Lincoln's starting to get notice from people as the only member of the House of Representatives to stand up to the president and say, "Show me where. Prove to me. Prove to the people. Where were these people killed?" All right, so this next one is one of my favorite stories about Lincoln. Okay, so imagine this: there's a bunch of people, 1,000 people, 40 reporters. Lincoln's up and he's giving a speech, and everyone's just mesmerized by him. The words he's saying, the way he's saying it, the emotion and things like that. People are just like enamored, just wow, that's a beautiful speech. Oh my God, the words he's using, so articulate, so amazing. And then when people say, "Oh, well, cool, what was the speech about?" Nobody can remember. The 1,000 people there, no one remembers a specific detail about what was said. The 40 reporters, none of them wrote anything down. They were just so enamored with what Lincoln's saying. Now, here's the thing: Lincoln would carry his speeches in his hat. He would take out his hat, take the speech out, give the speech, put the hat, put the hat back on, give the speech, put the speech back in the hat, put his hat back on. When Lincoln looked for his speech, the speech was gone. So there's no record of this speech ever happening, but everyone who was there was like, it was such an amazing speech. So it's known as Lincoln's lost speech because the speech is lost and nobody remembers what was said exactly, but they just remember it was a beautiful speech. All right. Now, the next thing that happened really, really upset Lincoln. Lincoln was known to be a calm, cool dude, but this next thing, the Dred Scott case, really, really upset him. All right, so here's the Dred Scott case. What happened was this. There was a slave named Dred Scott. Now, he and his owner moved from a slave state to a free state. Now, by law, by state laws that are free, they say when a person who is a slave comes into the free territory, they are free, especially when they set up residency, meaning they're planning to live here, they are now free. So what happened was the slave and the slave owner, they settled in the free territory. And what ends up happening about a year later, the slave master guy dies. So Dred Scott takes the dead man's body, the slave owner body. They go back to the slave states and they bury the guy. Now, Dred Scott's going back home to the free state, and the slave owner's family is like, hey, where are you going? He's like, I'm going back home. I'm free now. And they're like, no, you're not. You're not free. You're still our property. He's like, no. I live in a free state. I established residency there. Ergo, I am free. So they go to court. And then this court case, it goes to appeals. And from appeals, it goes to the Supreme Court. And basically everyone was like, well, this guy's going to get his freedom because, again, state laws. But the Supreme Court says no. No, Dred Scott is still a slave. And they basically say any person who was a slave, even if they go into a free state, set up residency or whatever, they are still property. So no matter what an escaped slave does, according to the Supreme Court at this time, they are still slaves and they are still property. And this upset Lincoln and like half the country. But Lincoln was furious. Okay. Now, Lincoln and this guy right there, you see Stephen Douglas, they are total opposites. Okay. Lincoln thought the Dred Scott decision was horrible. Stevens liked it. Lincoln is 6'4", right? 6'4", maybe about 170, 180 pounds. Stephen Douglas is like 5'2", 215, 220 pounds. Total opposites of one another, right? And they're both going for the U.S. Senate seat in Illinois. Now, these guys, even the way they speak, total 180s. Lincoln speaks very dignified, very soft tone, and uses these elegant words. Whereas Stephen Douglas is very, the fire and brimstone is going to come down. It's going to come at us if you vote for Lincoln. Now, if you vote for me, I will save us all. He's very animated. He's very loud voice. Lincoln, again, soft, uses big words, and is a master of language, where Stephen Douglas is animated, fiery, and in your face with a booming voice. Here's another kicker, too. Not only are they going for the same Senate seat, but they're also at the same time going for the same girl. Yeah. So just another little mix in the whole thing. There are 6 debates, and these debates are so big, people actually sell tickets to them and make some money off their debates. Okay. At the end, the election comes, and Lincoln wins the popular vote, but he loses the election because they go by the Electoral College. And that's what Stephen Douglas did. He won that. So he won the Senate seat, but he lost the girl. And that's who Lincoln marries. And that is the woman Mary Todd. Now, because he was a freshman senator who went against the President Polk, because he was that guy who's running for the U.S. Senate seat who gave those amazing speeches with Stephen Douglas. He gained so much national attention that the new Republican Party was basically like, this is the guy we want to run for us. And they asked him, would you want to run for president under the Republican name? And he said, yes. So on November 6th, 1860, the election comes and Lincoln wins. When he wins, some states are already talking about separating from the United States because, again, Lincoln is anti-slavery. And those slave states are already talking about separating because he won. All right, so here is your question at the very end. Now, I don't know if you guys know this term or not, but the word inevitable means it's going to happen. Okay, no matter what, it's going to happen. So my question to you is this. Using what you already know, do you think the Civil War was inevitable or could it have been avoided? You know, from the time of Washington up until Lincoln, all the other presidents basically kicked the can down the road. They didn't want to deal with the whole slavery issue, so they left it to the next president and the next president. Do you think Lincoln could have just said, you know what, let's avoid this. Let's kick this problem down the road. You know, do you think this problem could have kept going and on until now, or do you think sometime, some way, we were gonna have a war? We're gonna have to. We're either gonna have to fight or really solve this problem of do we keep slavery or do we get rid of it? So what do you think? Okay. So once you've written down your response, you're done with this lesson. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. All right. So with that being said, you guys, you take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys later. All right.